My name is Cecilia, and I just turned 53 last month. For 23 years, I believed I had the perfect marriage with my husband Robert in our beautiful suburban Minnesota home. We had everything most couples dream of: success, comfort, and what I thought was undying love. But something changed in Robert these past few months. I noticed small things at first, nothing I could quite put my finger on. Never did I imagine I would end up gasping for air as dirt filled my lungs, buried alive by the man who vowed to love me until death did us part. If not for a stranger walking his dog in those woods that night, I would not be here to tell this story. Where are you watching from today? If you want to hear how I survived being buried alive by my husband and his mistress and what happened next, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up. Robert and I met at a community fundraiser for the local children's hospital 25 years ago. I was working as an event coordinator, then passionate about interior design, but still finding my footing professionally. He walked in wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit, confidence radiating from him as he made a sizable donation that impressed everyone in the room. I was immediately drawn to his charisma, the way he commanded attention without seeming to try. "You must be very proud of your contribution," I said when we were finally introduced. "What I'm proud of is finally meeting the woman responsible for this beautiful event." He responded with a smile that made me feel like the only person in the crowded ballroom. Our romance was a whirlwind. Within 2 months, we were inseparable. By 4 months, he had proposed with a diamond ring that made my friends gasp. And 6 months after our first meeting, we were married in a lavish ceremony that was featured in our local society pages. We bought land in an affluent suburb and built our dream home together. I would spend hours poring over blueprints, selecting materials, and creating a space that perfectly reflected both our personalities. Robert indulged my every design whim, saying he trusted my vision implicitly. The 5-bedroom house with its grand staircase, gourmet kitchen, and sprawling backyard became our sanctuary and the envy of our social circle. As Robert climbed the ranks at his construction company, eventually becoming CEO, I pursued my passion for interior design. What started as favors for friends helping them select color schemes or rearrange furniture blossomed into a thriving business with corporate and high-end residential clients throughout the Midwest. My calendar was constantly full, and I took pride in transforming spaces while building a reputation for sophisticated, timeless design. Balancing work and our marriage required effort, but we made it look effortless. We had a rule about weekly date nights no matter how busy we became. Sometimes these were elaborate evenings at exclusive restaurants. Other times they were simple dinners at home with a good bottle of wine. Those intimate conversations kept us connected through the demands of our careers. Robert's company grew exponentially under his leadership. He specialized in commercial developments and had a knack for securing lucrative contracts. Our financial security allowed us to travel extensively, collect art, and enjoy the finer things in life. We had season tickets to the symphony, attended charity galas, and hosted dinner parties that our friends eagerly anticipated. The only shadow in our seemingly perfect life was our struggle with infertility. For 3 years, we tried everything: fertility treatments, specialists, even experimental procedures. Each failure was devastating, especially for me. I wanted so badly to create a family with Robert, to see his eyes and smile in our children. "Maybe this is the universe telling us our purpose lies elsewhere," Robert said one night after another disappointing doctor's appointment. "We have each other's successful careers and the ability to make a difference in other ways." Though adoption was an option, we ultimately decided to embrace our life as a childless couple. We became the favorite aunt and uncle to our friends' children, established scholarships at local schools, and donated generously to children's charities. We built a life focused on each other, our careers, and our wide circle of friends. For our 20th anniversary, Robert orchestrated a surprise that demonstrated just how thoughtful he could be. He told me we were having a quiet dinner at home, but when I arrived, our house was filled with 100 of our closest friends and family. He had secretly flown in my sister from California and my best friend from college in Florida. He had hired a string quartet to play our wedding song as he presented me with a diamond necklace that matched my engagement ring. 20 years ago, I made the best decision of my life, he announced to our guests, looking at me with what I believed was genuine adoration. Every day since has only proven how right I was to marry this incredible woman. I trusted Robert completely. Despite our considerable assets, we never signed a prenuptial agreement. Our home, investment properties, and bank accounts were all jointly owned. Our wills named each other as sole beneficiaries. I believed nothing could ever come between us, that our love was unshakable and eternal. This naive trust would eventually cost me everything, and nearly my life. Our friends often commented on how lucky we were to have such a solid marriage in a world where relationships seemed increasingly disposable. "What's your secret, T?" they would ask at dinner parties. "Communication and respect," Robert would answer, placing his hand over mine. "And separate bathrooms," I would add, making everyone laugh. But the truth was, I thought our marriage worked because we were genuinely each other's best friend and greatest supporter. I believed Robert when he said he couldn't imagine his life without me. I never once suspected that one day he would not only imagine it, but actively try to make it happen in the most horrific way possible. The first signs were subtle, so subtle that I questioned whether I was imagining things. Robert had always been meticulous about his appearance, but suddenly he became obsessed with fitness, hiring an expensive personal trainer and spending hours at the gym. His wardrobe underwent a transformation too. Designer suits replaced with more youthful, trendy options. At 56, he began dressing like someone a decade younger. "Just trying to stay healthy and current," he said when I commented on the changes. "Running a company with younger executives means I need to keep up appearances." It made sense, but something about his explanation felt rehearsed. Then came the late nights at the office. Previously, Robert made it home for dinner by 7 most evenings. Now, 9 or 10 o'clock arrivals became the norm. "The Madison project is causing headaches," he would explain, loosening his tie and pouring himself a scotch. "The client keeps changing specifications." The Madison project became a recurring excuse, but when I offered to bring dinner to the office one evening, he quickly declined. "The conference room is a disaster area, with blueprints everywhere. We would have nowhere to sit." Our intimacy began to wane. Robert, once affectionate and attentive, now seemed distant even when physically present. He would flinch slightly when I touched him unexpectedly, as though my hands burned his skin. In bed, he claimed exhaustion night after night, turning away from me to sleep facing the wall. I noticed he had changed passwords on his phone and laptop. When I needed to use his computer one day to print a document while mine was updating, he nearly snatched it from my hands. "Just finishing something sensitive for work," he said, voice tight with tension. "Use your phone instead." I began blaming myself, wondering if I had become boring or unattractive. I scheduled a makeover at an upscale salon, bought new lingerie, and planned special dinners at home. One night, I prepared all his favorites: filet mignon, truffled potatoes, and chocolate souffle, and wore a new dress I thought he would appreciate. He came home, glanced at the elaborate table setting, and sighed. "I already ate with clients. You should have texted me." "I wanted to surprise you," I said, fighting back tears. "Next time, just check with me first," he replied, heading upstairs to shower without another word. While paying bills the following month, I noticed unusual withdrawals from our joint account. $5,000 here, $7,000 there. When questioned, Robert dismissed my concerns. "Just business expenses that will be reimbursed. Nothing to worry about." But the reimbursements never appeared in our accounts. I also discovered discrepancies in the company financial reports he had left on his desk. Large consulting fees to a company I'd never heard of, with no supporting documentation. When I mentioned it casually over breakfast, his reaction was disproportionate. "Are you spying on me now?" He snapped, color rising in his face. "Those papers were private. And since when do you question my business decisions?" At a charity gala, my friend Amanda pulled me aside while Robert was at the bar. Is everything okay between you two? She asked, her eyes concerned. Of course. Why do you ask? Just an observation. Robert seems different lately. And he was very friendly with Diane Thompson's daughter at the last board meeting. I brushed off her concern, but the seed was planted. I began watching more closely, noticing how Robert's eyes would linger on younger women, how he would angle his body away from me in social situations, as though creating distance. Then came the lipstick, a smudge of bright red on his shirt collar. I was doing laundry when I noticed it, a glaring mark against the white cotton. Robert never wore lipstick, and I favored neutral tones. That evening, I held up the shirt as he walked into our bedroom. Care to explain this? He barely glanced at it. Probably from Patricia giving me a congratulatory kiss after the Wilson contract signing. You know how demonstrative she is. Patricia was his 60-year-old secretary who wore only coral lipstick and had been happily married for 35 years. The explanation was so absurd I almost laughed. Do you think I'm stupid, Robert? I think you're creating problems where none exist, he said coldly. This paranoia is concerning. Maybe you should talk to someone professional about these unfounded suspicions. That night, as he slept, I lay awake questioning my sanity. Was I imagining things? Had I become the stereotypical paranoid wife? But the evidence kept accumulating, and my instincts screamed that something was very wrong. After weeks of internal debate, guilt, and anxiety, I made a decision that felt like a betrayal, but was ultimately self-preservation. I hired Jack Phillips, a private investigator recommended by a client who had gone through a difficult divorce. The meeting in his modest office downtown made me feel like I had stepped into a film noir. I never thought I'd be doing something like this, I admitted, hands twisting in my lap. Nobody ever does, Mrs. Lawrence, Jack said kindly. But sometimes we need certainty before we can move forward one way or another. As he took my check and information about Robert's schedule, I felt both relief and dread. Whatever Jack discovered would change everything, but living in suspicion was slowly destroying me. I needed the truth, even if it shattered the life I thought I had. The manila envelope felt heavy in my hands, though it contained only a dozen photographs and a typed report. Jack had called me 3 days after our initial meeting, his voice carefully neutral. I have some information you should review in person. Now, sitting in his office, I stared at the envelope, afraid to open it. Would you like me to summarize the contents first? Jack offered. I shook my head. No, I need to see for myself. The photos were crisp and clear, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Robert entering a luxury apartment building I didn't recognize. Robert with his arm around a young woman with long, dark hair. Robert kissing her in the elevator, his hand possessively at her waist. The final photo showed them entering an apartment together, his hand sliding down to her backside. Her name is Jessica Winters, Jack explained as I stared at the images. 29 years old, employed at Robert's company for the past 8 months as a project coordinator. Based on my surveillance, the relationship appears to have begun approximately 6 months ago. I felt physically ill, a cold sweat breaking across my forehead as I struggled to breathe. The betrayal was one thing painful, but perhaps survivable. It was the elaborate deception, the months of lies and gaslighting that cut deepest. There's more, Jack continued gently. The apartment is in his name, purchased, not rented 3 months ago for $1.2 million, and he's been transferring funds to a separate account in both their names. The room seemed to tilt. How much? Just over $400,000, Savon. The amount was staggering, not enough to significantly impact our overall wealth, but a clear indication of his intentions. He was setting up a life with her, preparing an escape. I also ran a background check on Ms. Winters, Jack added, handing me another sheet. She has a pattern of relationships with older, wealthy men, and there's something else you should know. Her father is Thomas Winters. The name hit me like a physical blow. Thomas Winters was Robert's business partner and oldest friend. His partner's daughter, I whispered. He's having an affair with his partner's daughter. Jack nodded grimly. Thomas doesn't appear to know. At least there's no indication in their business interactions. I left Jack's office in a daze, the envelope tucked in my purse like a bomb ready to detonate my life. For 3 days, I moved through our house like a ghost, unable to eat or sleep. I canceled client meetings claiming illness. In a way, I was ill heartsick and disoriented by the collapse of everything I believed true. The physical symptoms were intense chest pains that had me momentarily fearing a heart attack, migraine headaches that blurred my vision, nausea that left me dry heaving in the bathroom. My friends called concerned about my sudden disappearance from social events, but I couldn't bear to speak to anyone. While Robert was at work, I researched Jessica online. Her social media profiles showed a beautiful, confident young woman who posted inspirational quotes about ambition and getting what you deserve in life. Photos revealed her at expensive restaurants on exotic vacations, always impeccably dressed in designer clothes. There were no pictures of Robert, but several cryptic posts about new beginnings and upgrading your life coincided with the timeline of their affair. I discovered she had been briefly engaged to a 60-year-old real estate developer 2 years ago, and before that had a relationship with the CFO of a major corporation, both men significantly older and wealthier than Jessica. She had a pattern indeed. When I finally confronted Robert, I chose a Sunday morning when he couldn't escape to the office. I placed the photos on the kitchen counter as he came down for coffee. "What's this?" he asked, picking up the top photo. "You tell me," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. His face underwent a fascinating transformation, shock anger calculation, and finally a practiced contriteness. "Cecilia, I can explain." He began running a hand through his hair. "Please do. Explain how you've been sleeping with your business partner's 29-year-old daughter for 6 months. Explain the apartment you bought her. Explain the $400,000. He flinched at the specific details. "You had me investigated. You invaded my privacy." His attempt to shift blame ignited my anger. "Don't you dare turn this around. You've been lying to my face for months, making me think I was crazy for suspecting something was wrong." After several denials and attempts to minimize, Robert finally dropped into a chair, the fight leaving him. "It was a mistake. A midlife crisis, if you want to call it that. Jessica means nothing to me. The apartment and money suggest otherwise." He reached for my hand, which I immediately withdrew. "I'll end it today. We can go to counseling, work through this. 23 years of marriage is worth fighting for, isn't it?" His sudden pivot to saving our marriage caught me off guard. I had expected continued denial, or perhaps anger, but not this apparent willingness to recommit. "I need time to think," I said finally. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." "You can," he insisted, eyes welling with tears that seemed genuine. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'll be completely transparent. You can have access to my phone, email, everything." Against my better judgment and with strong reservations, I agreed to try marriage counseling. Dr. Maureen Foster specialized in couples dealing with infidelity, and her direct approach initially seemed effective. Robert appeared remorseful in sessions, acknowledging the pain he'd caused and pledging to rebuild our relationship. "The affair was never about Cecilia lacking anything," he told Dr. Foster. "It was my own insecurities, feeling older, wondering if I was still attractive or vital." At home, he was attentive and present in ways he hadn't been for months. He sent flowers to my office, prepared dinner when I worked late, suggested weekend getaways to reconnect. I wanted to believe he was sincere. Then came the phone call. I returned home early from a client meeting to hear Robert in his study door ajar. "I know I missed you too," he was saying softly. "It's only temporary. We have to be patient. Yes, I still want that future with you. Just give me a little more time to sort things out." My heart turned to stone as I listened. When he emerged from the study, I was sitting in the living room, outwardly calm despite the storm inside me. "Who were you talking to?" I asked. "Just Craig about the Henderson development," he replied smoothly. That night, while he showered, I checked his phone. He had deleted his call history, but not his text messages. There were dozens between him and Jessica, including one from that afternoon. I hate this waiting game. When can we be together for real? The last shred of hope for our marriage disintegrated. Robert hadn't ended the affair at all. He was playing both sides, telling me what I wanted to hear while continuing his relationship with Jessica. Everything. The counseling, the tears, the apparent remorse had been an elaborate performance. The divorce attorney's office was in a discreet building downtown as leather chairs and wood paneling designed to comfort clients during their most vulnerable moments. Diana Everett had been recommended as the best divorce attorney in the state, particularly for the high net worth cases involving potential financial deception. Based on what you've told me and these financial records, we have a strong case for an advantageous settlement. Diana explained, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed my documents. Minnesota is an equitable distribution state, which doesn't necessarily mean 50-50, but given the length of your marriage and your contributions to his success, we should be able to secure at least half of the marital assets. I'm less concerned about money than I am about protecting what I've built. I explained, thinking of my design business. We'll ensure your business remains solely yours. Now, let's discuss a strategy for moving forward. I suggest gathering comprehensive documentation of all assets before filing. Bank statements, investment accounts, property deeds, business valuations, everything. Once he knows divorce is coming, documents might start disappearing. For the next 2 weeks, I meticulously compiled financial records, made copies of important documents, and secured them in a safe deposit box Diana had advised me to open in my name only. I photographed valuable art and antiques in our home and had our jewelry collection professionally appraised. I planned to confront Robert once all preparations were complete, but fate intervened with a conversation I was never meant to hear. I was working from home in my office, which adjoined Robert's study through a bathroom they shared. Robert thought I had left for a client meeting that had been rescheduled last minute. "She's becoming a problem we need to address," I heard Robert say, his voice low but clear through the partially open bathroom door. "The private investigator was just the beginning." "I told you this would happen," a female voice responded, Jessica. I realized with a jolt. She's not going to just fade away conveniently. If she files for divorce, this gets complicated. The financial exposure is significant. Jessica's laugh was cold. "So do something about it. Permanently." There was a long pause. "That's not funny, Jess." "Who's laughing? You said yourself she's the only obstacle to our future, to the company expansion, to everything we've planned." "There are lines I won't cross," Robert replied, but his tone lacked conviction. "Really? Because you've crossed plenty already. What's one more if it solves all our problems? Do you have the courage to follow through? Or am I with a man who can't make the hard decisions?" Their voices moved further away, and I couldn't hear Robert's response. But I had heard enough to understand the horrifying implication. They weren't just discussing divorce, they were discussing something much darker. The casual way Jessica had suggested doing something about me permanently sent ice through my veins. That night I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with the conversation I'd overheard. Was I overreacting? Would Robert actually consider harming me? The rational part of my brain said no. He was many things, but not a murderer. Yet the cold calculation in Jessica's voice haunted me. The next day, I installed security cameras throughout the house, using a service that uploaded footage directly to cloud storage only I could access. I changed the locks on my office and added a deadbolt to my bedroom door. I began checking my food and drinks carefully before consuming them. I called Amanda, my oldest friend, voice shaking as I relayed my concerns. "Am I paranoid? Am I becoming the crazy, suspicious wife Robert accused me of being?" "Cecilia, listen to me," Amanda said firmly. "Trust your instincts. If you feel unsafe, you are unsafe. Period. Come stay with us. Our guest house is private, and Mark's home security system is state-of-the-art. I need a few more days to finish gathering evidence for the divorce," I explained. "Then I'll come. Promise me you won't stay there alone with him any longer than absolutely necessary." "I promise." 2 days later, I discovered my car's brake lines had been tampered with when my mechanic called during a routine maintenance check. "Mrs. Lawrence, did you know there's a slow leak in your brake line? Looks like someone nicked it deliberately. If you'd driven much further, your brakes would have failed completely." That same week, I experienced violent stomach pains after dinner, spending hours vomiting. Robert had insisted on cooking that night, something he rarely did. And most disturbing of all, I found my blood pressure medication had been replaced with different pills that, when researched online, turned out to be a powerful sedative that could be fatal in high doses. As my fear escalated, Robert's behavior took another unexpected turn. He became overly attentive and loving, constantly checking my whereabouts and suggesting we spend more time together. "I've been thinking," he said one evening, massaging my shoulders in a way that once would have felt comforting, but now made my skin crawl. "We need time away, just the two of us. Let's go to the lake cabin this weekend." Our cabin on Lake Superior was remote, accessible only by a private road through dense forest with no neighbors for miles. The suggestion sent alarm bells ringing in my head. "This weekend I have clients. Family comes first, remember? That was our agreement in counseling. Just 3 days to reconnect without distractions." His insistence, combined with the strange gleam in his eyes, confirmed my worst fears. But I realized that openly refusing might alert him to my suspicions. I needed time to finalize my escape plan. "You're right," I said, forcing a smile. 3 days, just us. No phones, no work." "Exactly," he beamed, kissing the top of my head. "I'll make all the arrangements. Don't worry about a thing." "Who else knows we're going?" I asked casually. "Should I tell Amanda to reschedule our lunch next week?" "Let's not tell anyone," he suggested. "Complete privacy. It'll be more special that way." That night, I texted Amanda from the bathroom with the water running to cover the sound. "Going to cabin with R this weekend. If you don't hear from me by Sunday 6 p.m., call police. Cabin address and envelope in your mailbox tomorrow." Her response was immediate. "Don't go. Come here now." But I knew running immediately might provoke Robert. I needed to appear compliant while preparing for whatever he had planned. I packed a small bag with essentials that I could grab quickly if needed, and slipped a second phone into a hidden pocket sewn into my jacket, a burner phone Robert didn't know about. As we prepared to leave for what might be our final trip together, I felt a strange calm descend. The game was in its final moves, and despite my fear, I was determined not to be a passive victim in whatever scenario Robert and Jessica had devised. The drive to our lake cabin took 3 hours, winding through increasingly remote terrain until the paved roads gave way to gravel. Robert was uncharacteristically talkative, sharing stories from the early days of his business and asking about my design projects with apparent interest. To any observer, we would have looked like a normal couple heading for a romantic weekend, but the undercurrent of tension was palpable to me. I noticed a dark SUV several car lengths behind us for most of the journey. It maintained the same distance, slowing when we slowed, accelerating when we did. When Robert turned onto the private access road to our property, the SUV continued straight, but I caught a glimpse of the driver, a woman with long, dark hair. "Did you see that car?" I asked casually. "It seemed to be following us for a while." Robert glanced in the rearview mirror. "Probably just heading to one of the other lake properties. There are several access roads off the highway." But I had seen his knuckles whiten on the steering wheel, a brief flicker of recognition in his eyes. We arrived at the cabin as dusk was falling, the lake a sheet of burnished copper in the fading light. Normally, I loved this place, the rustic charm of the log structure, the wraparound porch where we would drink morning coffee, the stone fireplace that had warmed countless winter evenings. Now, its isolation felt threatening. Robert carried our bags inside while I stood on the porch surveying the familiar landscape. Dense forest surrounded 3 sides of the property, with the lake forming the 4th boundary. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away. Cell reception was spotty at best. We were truly alone. Inside, Robert busied himself starting a fire while I unpacked food in the kitchen. Through the window, I noticed movement at the forest edge, a flash of something dark disappearing among the trees. The hairs on my neck stood up. "Everything okay?" Robert asked suddenly behind me. I forced a smile. "Just admiring the view. I forgot how beautiful it is up here." After dinner, which I barely touched, claiming exhaustion from the drive, Robert suggested a walk. "Now, it's almost completely dark," I protested. "That's what makes it special. The stars are incredible on clear nights like this. Remember how we used to walk out to the point and lie on the rocks counting constellations?" His voice held a nostalgic warmth that almost made me doubt my suspicions. Almost. "I'm pretty tired. Maybe tomorrow morning instead." "Please, Cecilia," he said, taking my hands in his. "It's important to me. Part of reconnecting." The intensity in his eyes told me refusing would only delay whatever he had planned, perhaps making him more desperate and unpredictable. Better to face this on my terms, alert and prepared. I slipped the burner phone into my pocket and grabbed a flashlight. "Okay, just a short walk?" We followed the well-worn path through the woods toward the rocky point that jutted into the lake. Robert walked slightly ahead, the beam of his flashlight creating dancing shadows among the trees. I kept my own light pointed at the ground, watching for roots and stones, but also hyper-aware of every sound in the forest around us. "It's so peaceful out here," Robert said as we reached the clearing at the point. "No one for miles, just us and nature." The way he emphasized "no one for miles" sent a chill down my spine. I glanced back toward the cabin, now just a distant glow through the trees. We had walked farther than I realized. "Beautiful," I agreed, fingering the phone in my pocket. No signal as expected, but its presence was still reassuring. Robert stepped closer, wrapping an arm around my waist. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about the future." "Have you?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, too high and brittle. "Yes, about what we both need to move forward." A twig snapped behind us, and I whirled around, heart pounding. A figure emerged from the shadows, Jessica wearing all black, her expression coldly determined. "You weren't supposed to be here until later," Robert hissed at her. "Plans change," she replied, calmly pulling on leather gloves. "Let's get this over with." I backed away, understanding crashing over me in a sickening wave. "So this is what you planned, both of you together?" "It wasn't supposed to come to this," Robert said, his voice almost apologetic. "If you hadn't hired that investigator, if you had just accepted the natural end of our marriage—" "Natural end? There was nothing natural about your betrayal." I spat, continuing to back away slowly, measuring the distance to the path, calculating whether I could outrun them to the cabin. "Enough talking," Jessica interrupted. "She knows why we're here. Hold her." Robert lunged forward, grabbing my arms with unexpected strength. I struggled, kicking and screaming, but we were too far from anyone who might hear. Jessica approached with something glinting in her hand, a syringe. "This will make it easier for everyone," she said in the same tone one might use to discuss the weather. "Robert, please," I begged, looking into the eyes of the man I had loved for 23 years. "This isn't you. You don't want to do this." For a moment, I thought I saw hesitation, a flicker of the man I knew. Then Jessica spoke again, her voice sharp. "Remember what's at stake. 400 million in development contracts if we merge with my father's company. A new life. Freedom." His expression hardened, and I knew the Robert I had married was gone if he had ever truly existed. The needle plunged into my neck, and almost immediately my limbs began to feel heavy. Through increasingly blurry vision, I saw them drag me deeper into the woods, away from the path. They stopped at a rectangular hole in the ground, freshly dug 6 feet long and several feet deep. My mind screamed in horror, even as my body became unresponsive. They were going to bury me alive. "The medicine will keep her sedated, but breathing for a few hours," Jessica explained clinically. "By the time it wears off, there will be no air left. The medical examiner will find sedatives in her system consistent with suicide. Everyone knows she's been unstable since discovering your affair. I felt myself being lowered into the cold earth. Robert removed my wedding ring evidence that needed to disappear. I realized dimly. No one will find her out here, he said, voice distant through my drug-induced fog. And we have solid alibis for the entire weekend in Chicago. Dirt began to hit my face as they filled in the grave. I was conscious enough to understand what was happening, but too paralyzed to fight back. With my last moments of clarity before the sedative took full effect, I managed to position my arms to create a small air pocket around my face and turn my head to the side. As earth covered me completely, darkness enveloping me, I heard their receding footsteps and the sound of a car engine starting. Then silence broken only by my shallow breathing and the distant call of an owl. In the absolute darkness, time lost all meaning. I drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes convinced I had already died, other times acutely aware of the diminishing oxygen in my earthen prison. I thought of my life with Robert, the love I had believed in, the future we had planned, all built on foundations as insubstantial as sand. I don't know how many hours passed before I heard it, the sound of digging. Terror surged through me. Had Robert returned to make sure the job was complete? Or was it some forest animal drawn by the smell of disturbed earth? The digging grew louder, more deliberate. This was no animal. I tried to make noise to signal my presence, but my vocal cords produced only the faintest whimper. Then miraculously a voice. "Hello, is someone there?" It wasn't Robert's voice. It wasn't Jessica's. It was a stranger, a man whose voice I had never heard before, but who would become my salvation. The first breath of fresh air was so sweet it made me dizzy. Rough hands brushed dirt from my face, and a blurry figure leaned over me, backlit by what seemed like blinding light, but was merely the beam of a powerful flashlight. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" The voice was deep, concerned, and completely unfamiliar. "Stay with me. Help is coming." I tried to speak, but could only cough, my throat raw from the dirt I had inhaled. A water bottle appeared at my lips, and I drank greedily, each swallow painful but life-affirming. "My name is Michael Sinclair," the voice continued as strong arms gently lifted me from my grave. "I'm a forest ranger. My dog Rusty sensed something was wrong. Can you tell me your name?" "Cecilia," I managed to whisper. "My husband, he tried to—" "Don't try to talk now," Michael advised, wrapping a blanket around my dirt-encrusted body. "The ambulance should be here soon. I had to drive out to the main road to get cell reception." As my vision cleared, I saw my rescuer clearly for the first time, a tall man in his early 50s, with a weathered face and kind eyes, dressed in the green uniform of the State Forest Service. Beside him sat a German Shepherd, alert and watchful. "That's Rusty," Michael explained, following my gaze. "He's trained to find lost hikers, but tonight he found you. We were doing our regular patrol of the hiking trails when he started acting strangely, pulled me off the path toward this clearing." The gravity of what had happened, what had almost happened, hit me in waves. I had been buried alive by my husband and his mistress. If not for a ranger's routine patrol and his dog's keen senses, I would have suffocated in that makeshift grave, my disappearance either never solved or dismissed as a suicide by a distraught wife. The ambulance arrived with paramedics who assessed my condition with professional efficiency. Hypothermia, mild oxygen deprivation, contusions from the struggle, and traces of a powerful sedative in my system. "You're extremely lucky," one paramedic commented as they loaded me into the ambulance. "Another few hours." Michael rode with me to the hospital, his steady presence anchoring me to reality when panic threatened to overwhelm me. "I'll stay until you have family or friends with you," he promised. "You shouldn't be alone." At the regional medical center, doctors expressed amazement at my survival. "The cold temperature slowed your metabolism, reducing your oxygen needs," the emergency physician explained. "And whoever buried you didn't compact the soil fully, allowing some air exchange. Still, it's remarkable you didn't suffocate or succumb to hypothermia." Police officers came to take my statement, their expressions growing increasingly grave as I recounted Robert and Jessica's plot. My voice failed repeatedly as I described the moment the dirt had covered my face, the absolute darkness, the waning air. "We'll need to take photos of your injuries and collect your clothing for evidence," a female detective named Ramirez explained gently, "and we'll dispatch officers to locate your husband immediately." But Robert and Jessica had planned well. When police arrived at our home in Minnesota, neighbors confirmed they had seen the couple leave with suitcases early that morning, mentioning a weekend trip to Chicago. Hotel security footage showed them checking in that afternoon, establishing the alibi they had discussed at my gravesite. "It's your word against theirs," Detective Ramirez explained when she returned the next day. "They claim they left you at the cabin alive and well, saying you wanted some time alone." Without physical evidence connecting them directly to the attack, the district attorney may struggle to build a case. The psychological trauma left me unable to speak for several days after my rescue. Nightmares of suffocation woke me screaming, my body drenched in sweat. Hospital staff had to remove the covers from my bed because the weight triggered panic attacks, memories of Earth pressing down on me. Throughout this time, Michael visited daily, sometimes sitting quietly in the corner of my room, reading a book, other times gently encouraging me to talk about neutral topics, the weather, the view from my window, his dog's latest antics. His presence became a lifeline, a reminder that there was still goodness in a world that had revealed its darkest aspects to me. When Amanda arrived, flying in immediately after receiving my call, she burst into tears at the sight of me. "I knew something was wrong when you didn't check in by 6. I called the police right away, but they said they couldn't do anything until you were missing for 24 hours. If not for that ranger." "I know," I whispered, the words still difficult to form. "You're staying with us when you're discharged," she insisted. "Our guest house is all ready for you." But I was reluctant to put Amanda and her family at risk. Robert had proven himself capable of attempted murder. What would stop him from harming those who helped me? It was Michael who offered an alternative. "I have a cabin on the other side of the forest reserve," he said during one of his visits. "It's off-grid but comfortable. No one would think to look for you there, and I'd be nearby if you needed anything." "Why would you help me like this?" I asked, genuinely puzzled by the kindness of this virtual stranger. "You've already saved my life." He considered the question seriously. 20 years ago, my sister was killed by her husband after multiple failed attempts to leave him. The system failed her at every turn. I couldn't help her then, but maybe I can help you now. When the hospital finally discharged me, I made my decision. I would stay at Michael's cabin temporarily while gathering the strength and resources to fight back against Robert's attempt to silence me permanently. Despite the police's skepticism about building a case, I was determined not to let him and Jessica escape justice. Robert, meanwhile, had taken control of the narrative with stunning efficiency. Through his attorneys, he expressed profound relief at my miraculous survival after my tragic suicide attempt. He released statements about my deteriorating mental health following the discovery of his indiscretion and his deep regret that he hadn't recognized the severity of my depression. The story was picked up by local media, painting me as an unstable, jealous wife who had tried to end her life in a remote location while my patient-concerned husband was away on business. Jessica remained in the background, positioned as merely Robert's colleague, who had become something more only after our marriage had irretrievably broken down. "He's setting the stage for your disappearance to be ruled a suicide if you had died," Michael observed grimly as we watched the news report on the small TV in his cabin, "and simultaneously discrediting anything you might say against him now." But Robert and Jessica had made mistakes. Their confidence in their plan had led to carelessness, and together with Michael, I began to identify the loose threads that might unravel their carefully constructed narrative. Michael's cabin was everything mine wasn't: modest, practical, and genuinely isolated. Solar panels provided limited electricity, rainwater was collected for washing, and a generator served as backup for cloudy days. A wood stove kept the single room warm against the autumn chill, and shelves lined with books suggested how he passed the long winter evenings. "It's not fancy," he apologized as he showed me around, "but it's secure. No one knows you're here except Amanda, and she's sworn to secrecy." For the first week, I barely left the cabin, still recovering physically from my ordeal and jumping at every sound from the surrounding forest. Michael respected my space, but checked in daily, sometimes bringing supplies, other times just sitting on the porch with Rusty offering silent companionship. One evening, as we shared a simple dinner of fish he had caught in the nearby stream, I asked the question that had been nagging at me. "What made you dig when Rusty led you to that spot? What made you think someone was buried there?" Michael set down his fork, his expression somber. "Rusty is trained to detect human scent, living or deceased. When he started digging frantically at that spot, I knew something was wrong. I expected to find a body, honestly. Finding you alive was—" He paused, searching for words. "It was the kind of miracle you don't question." As my strength returned, so did my determination to bring Robert and Jessica to justice. "The problem is evidence," I explained to Michael as we pored over notes at his small kitchen table. "They were careful not to leave any at the gravesite." "But they must have made preparations," Michael reasoned. "Buying the shovel, the sedative, planning the location. Those leave traces." We began methodically building a case piece by piece. Amanda, working discreetly, discovered that Jessica had purchased gardening supplies, including a shovel at a hardware store near our cabin, 2 weeks before the incident. Security footage confirmed it was her, though she had worn a baseball cap and sunglasses. Michael, using his connections at the ranger station, found that an SUV matching Jessica's had been ticketed for unauthorized parking on Forest Service land near our cabin multiple times in the weeks leading up to my burial, suggesting reconnaissance trips to find the perfect spot. Most significantly, I remembered that the cabin had security cameras I had installed the previous year after a break-in. Robert had claimed they weren't working, but I knew the system uploaded to cloud storage automatically. With Amanda's help, I accessed the footage remotely. There, in high definition, was evidence of Robert and Jessica arriving at the cabin separately, discussing their plan in the kitchen, and Jessica preparing the syringe that had rendered me helpless. The cameras had captured it all, including their return from the woods without me cleaning up evidence, and Robert's chilling words, "By the time anyone finds her, if they ever do, there will be nothing to connect us to her death." With this critical evidence secured, we contacted Detective Ramirez, who was visibly relieved to have concrete proof supporting my account. "This changes everything," she confirmed after viewing the footage. "But we need to be strategic about how we proceed. They still don't know you have this evidence." Together with the police, we developed a plan to trap Robert and Jessica into incriminating themselves further. I would remain recovering in an undisclosed location, according to official statements, while in